Hey everyone, welcome back to L2Games and the L2Games Podcast. We are here with episode 2. I am joined once again by my buds Jason and Kyle. Guys, how you doing?
Oh, great.
Good.
Good,
Happy
good
to
to
be
hear.
here again.
Of course,
For
thank you for
our
coming again.
L2 second appearance.
L second appearance.
L second appearance.
I appreciate the attempt. All right,
Thank you.
so what are we talking about today?
We're talking sports game.
We are
I hope
talking
that was my
sports
cue to
games.
answer.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
We should have just taken that a complete left turn, Jason. Just like just taking it off the walls. We all pre-talked about sports games, and then Nick's just like, "What do you guys want to talk about?" And we're like, "The latest Barbie games didn't satisfy me to the level that I thought it was going to."
But we are here today to chat about sports games. So, before we go too far, when I say the word sports video game, or the phrase sports video game, what's the first thing that pops into your guys' heads?
EA Sports. It's in the game.
That's fair. The first one that pops into my head is FIFA. I don't even watch soccer. I've never played. No, I've played FIFA, but like I don't own FIFA. Have never owned FIFA, but it's the first one that pops into my head.
All right, do you guys get positive vibes when you hear sports video games, or is it kind of a meh thing, or overall negative impressions? What do you feel about sports games? Because I know they can be kind of a polarizing topic within gaming.
Now, I have a mixed response because I really like playing sports games, but the games themselves are so trash that like I feel bad every time I put it in because I know that I've just spent money on the same game as the year before, but I wanted to like update the teams. Like I'm gonna buy the next NHL game because I want Seattle Kraken in there. That's kind of the only reason. So like I love playing sports games. I have a lot of fun with them, but I also know that they're kind of trash.
Okay.
I tend to agree. Like I like playing them, and I can dump like a serious amount of hours into them. Like in some of the things like Be a Pro or the GM mode for some of these like the NHL games. But like I do acknowledge that most of the time it's the same game year over year, and I have a hard time like justifying a yearly purchase for them. But I do enjoy playing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
It's a
sports
good
video
buds
games
game.
they're kind of a strange niche within video gaming, because I know a lot of people who consider themselves more like hardcore gamers. Like my brother, for example, detests sport games, can't stand them at all. But some of my other friends who are more casual gamers, like I wouldn't really even label them as gamers, they're always down to hop into a couple rounds of NHL or NBA 2K or something. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're nice games to have for, sitting down with your friends and playing casually. But
Sports
what
games are like superhero movies. They're like they got mass appeal. They're easy to digest, but some of the more serious of the fan base, in this case cinephiles or hardcore gamers, might turn their nose up a little bit to just like the plainness to it.
Hmm.
I
And
like
really,
that
Martin
analogy.
Scorsese hates both. Yeah, you will not catch Martin Scorsese playing NHL 21, and he also famously hates Marvel movies, so that holds up.
Hmm.
All right, so I want to ask you guys, what are your favorite sports games?
I'm just a giant hockey fan, so of course it's got to be NHL. Although I do
Yeah.
realize that of the sports games, it's quite easily the worst. It has like if they spent months working on NBA and FIFA, they spent the last couple hours at the end of the year working on NHL, and I recognize that. The gameplay, it's not good. It's not
Yeah.
hockey. It's like this weird faux virtual hockey. The graphics are shit. They have one coach for every single team in the league. That guy's busy because they have no other money. They didn't bother making even a second model. So even though it's a trash game, I love hockey, and it's my favorite of the sports games.
Yeah, I think it's just because it doesn't make the most amount of money out of the more popular sports games. So they just like give it to the summer interns to do every year, and they're like, just here, just you guys do the hockey game.
Yeah,
Um,
learn how to code on this.
yeah. I also really like hockey, like the NHL games. Like if I'm gonna play like an EA sports game, it's probably gonna be NHL. But like Mario Strikers was one of my favorite games on the GameCube,
Oh
and
yeah.
that shit slaps. And so like any of the Mario sports games, like I really vibe with. Like there's something about them that always like, even if it's a sport that I don't usually, like would have an interest in, like tennis. I was putting hours into Mario Tennis and even golf. I've like maybe played 2 games of golf in my life, but you sit me in front of Mario Golf and I'm gonna have a good time.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I've never really thought of those games as being sports games. It's always a Mario game first and then a sports game second because they've always got whatever weird quirk or spin on the sport.
Yeah, they have personality, unlike the EA ones or like the big budget ones.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't come out every year too, which kind of helps because each game is bound to be at least somewhat different from the last entry in the series. And I mean, even stuff like Wii Sports. I loved me some Wii Sports. Wii Boxing, Wii Golf, Wii Bowling. Oh
Oh
man,
yeah,
those were the
that was the good
days.
shit. And I had all those like Wii Sports Resort, like anything that was like. I even have like Wii Fit. Did you ever have Wii Fit?
I didn't
Oh
Like the
have Wii
yeah.
Fit.
board. Yeah, I
The
had the board that that would
the
like tell you
board
you're too
was
fat or something.
the board was the worst thing to ever happen to this generation's body image because you stepped on it and told you were too fat.
Yeah,
It was brutal. Like
it
nothing.
was.
Seeing models and whatever did not affect me. Stepping on the Wii board just to like go play a fun game of boxing and it just tells me I'm overweight. That was
Yep.
horrific.
It's like, oh, I'm just gonna go play a little Nintendo game. Actually, the Nintendo game's telling you you're a fucking fat ass.
Yeah.
What about you, Nick? What are your favorite sports games?
So for me, it's got to be NBA 2K. I mean, obviously growing up, I was huge into basketball. I was, a pretty good basketball player at one point before my health decided to go to shit. But um, yeah, NBA 2K definitely for me, which I don't know. I feel bad about saying it in some ways because like it's just become such a monotonous series. Like they don't do anything to push the envelope with each successive entry. Like nothing has changed in probably the last 7 years worth of NBA 2K. And like even with the next gen PS5 version that just came out, really once you play it for like an hour or two, you don't really notice any of the differences anymore. It's the same game over and over again. And so like I kind of agree with you guys that like it's fun to play, but they aren't quality games because these developers aren't putting the time and effort into the games, especially being yearly releases, that other developers put into major AAA titles. So with that said, we've all kind of established that sports games are, kind of on the lower end as far as quality goes for video games. So I want to ask you guys, what do you think the problem with sports video games is?
I think the issue is that emulating the real life play of sports gets boring fast. Like, I can play real life hockey, I can lace them up, and I will hop on that ice and I will play until my legs give out because playing the actual game of hockey, it's a lot of fun. It's fast moving, you're ripping pucks, you're deking guys out, you're accidentally crashing into the boards you never learned how to break. It's a great time with you and your pals. When you're playing the virtual thing though, it's not quite right because you can't fully emulate the sports experience. So it's still fun. It is its own kind of world separate from the actual sport itself where like you know that you're playing a replica of it and it's not the actual sport you're playing, but it's still enjoyable. However, that gets old. There's no narrative to it is the one thing. It makes it easier to get further into something when there's a story behind it, when there's, conflict and characters and resolution. But if you're just playing a game to play the games, you'll get bored of it faster. And it's the same with like hockey and sports games, or even like Rocket League or something like that. There are days when I can play hours upon hours of it, but a lot of the time I get bored pretty quick and need to do something else because it's just the same thing over again. It's hard to want to do that for as long.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair.
I
It's
think one of the
interesting.
problems. Sorry,
Oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Nick.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the lack of a narrative in sports games because I know NBA 2K for I think like the last 7 years has tried to actually bring a narrative into the games with their My Career mode. So you've got a story which usually only lasts your rookie season, but you play as some up and coming NBA prospect who has to deal with family issues on one hand and coming into all this money and has a rival in the league and all sorts of stuff like that and has to learn how to fit in on an NBA team. It's always the same crap over and over again, but they at least try to bring some kind of narrative into it to shake the experience up every year. But the core game, yeah, there is no narrative too. So the bulk of the time you're spending with it, you're not really doing anything other than playing, like you said, an emulated version of the sport, which isn't even like a great emulation of it because none of these sports games I find capture the physicality and like the movement and the fluidity of professional athletes. Like when I play NBA 2K, I look at it and think, man, these players look no better than high school players at best.
I think it's just so hard to emulate the fine motor control and like the senses of the plays developing and just the really small movements that affect what happens on the court changes everything. And you can't do that in sports games because you only have such a rudimentary set of buttons to do to interact with things. Whereas in the actual game, you're doing hundreds of different movements. You're trying to set up elaborate things when you don't have that same level on the controller. You can never really do it. You're only going to be playing a boiled down version of it.
No, and they don't want to overcomplicate things because as soon as you
Yeah.
start making it so like, if you do a semi-turn, double tap X, and then, do like combos or shit, like a fighting game into like this sports game, you suddenly lose like all of your audience because most people are playing these games casually, right? And so like you're never going to get to that point where these games are emulating the real experience. And honestly, I don't think they have to. I don't think they
Hmm.
ever really need to get to the point where you feel like you're actually in and playing the game as like to a T to what it feels like to play the real game, because it's not the real game. It's a video game. You're playing a sport or you're a video game of a sport. And
Mhm.
so I think they like are getting closer every time. Like every year in these games they add like new sort of, stick movement in NHL and like ways you can move that around and passing differently, and your AI gets smarter, blah blah blah. But like it won't get to that level. And I don't really expect it to. I don't know if you guys do, but like I don't really expect it to get to that level. I expect it to get better. But with what I have like a problem with some of these sports games is because the game itself is never really changing, the games every year don't really change. So
Hmm.
like there's no like new twist you can add to basketball, like unless you're making a new game that's like not basketball anymore. If you're making an NBA game, you're going to be emulating the game that is played in the NBA, which is the same game year after year after year. And NHL can add threes, because you have like 3-on-3 overtime now, and that's a fun little mode. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be like the same rules, the same like regulations, the same way that the game runs, and the same loop. And I don't think that can ever change, nor should it ever change, because unless the game itself changes at a national level, like you don't have to change the game. And so I think that's where the problem with some of these games feeling very samey are, is because like the games don't actually have that much to do to change the game. You know what I'm saying?
Oh
Mhm.
yeah, I know
Like
what you're
the
saying.
the yeah, like the game itself is still the same. And so the video games don't have actually that much to change other than to improve, you know, graphics or feel of or movement, that sort of thing.
Yeah, just try to inch closer to emulating the real thing. For
Yeah.
me, the big problem with sports games is the fact that they're the same year after year, but not in the same sense as you're approaching it, Kyle. The way I view it as a problem is that it creates this really stale market where if you've played one of the games, you've played all of them, and yet these developers insist on churning them out every single year and charging you a premium price for them. And to me, it's really frustrating because, you know, sometimes, I will get suckered into buying the next one the next year, and it's only after I've bought it and played it that I realize, wow, nothing has changed. Or what's absolutely abhorrent to me and what I cannot stand is when a sports game has a certain feature or a certain game mechanic that works really well one year, and then the next year it's gone. And I swear to God, these sports game
Yeah.
developers do this intentionally. They take out features that people like, or they break some mechanic intentionally, so that
Hmm.
when people buy the
They can
next
bring it
game,
back.
all of a sudden they have something to complain about. And so they wait a couple of years and then they fix it and implement it as a quote unquote brand new feature, which was in the
Yeah.
series to begin with, but is now just making a return so that they can sell the game again. And so,
And people sing their praises for it, They're like, "Oh, like finally I can do this." Like, "Oh, it's such so much improvement. Great job, guys."
when in reality, yeah, you should have been able to do it all along.
Yeah.
So, looking at sports games, one of the big questions and our big question for today is, do you guys think that sports games should be free to play, like some of the more successful games we've seen in recent years, like Fortnite, Warzone, Apex, all the battle royales? Should sports games go free to play?
Hard? Yes. Absolutely. I 100% think that they should go free to play. They should have been free to play like 4 or 5 years ago when free to play was becoming like an actual big feasible option. Because like this gameplay loop is the same every year, year after year. It's always the same. But the problem is people spend like real money or real time getting their ultimate team up to a certain level, or their be a pro to a certain level, and then the next game comes out and all of their money and all of their time is basically thrown aside, and they have to then spend another $80 to start that experience over again. And then if you're big into hut, or I guess FIFA is probably big for the like the packs. I don't know how that works. I've never played it, but I understand it's a big cash cow for them.
Hmm.
Like that, like people just lose all their progress. And
Yeah.
so if you put it into free to play, you still got an income stream because you already have an income stream set up as the games exist, when you purchase them. But I feel like you're actually going to get people more engaged into purchasing stuff like ultimate packs or whatever they're called, because they don't have to buy another game and they know that that progress is not going to be lost.
Hmm. Well, yeah, when you look at free-to-play games, when I'm looking at microtransactions in those games, I'm not against the idea of microtransactions in general. I think in a free-to-play game, they're entirely justifiable. And so when I play a
Well, that's
free-to-play
how they
game
exist. Yeah.
like
Mhm.
Apex Legends, I approach it as if this game is the kind of quality that I would expect out of a game that I'm paying $80 for, then I have a budget of $80 that I can spend on microtransactions. But of course,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to spend that $80 all at once and I'm spending it over a longer period of time, I always end up going over that budget. So long term, I end up spending more money than I would on, say, a single player game that costs the same amount, costs the $80 retail.
No, I totally agree with you, and like I have that internal justification as well, because like I hadn't spent any money on Apex for the longest time. I like didn't buy the the ultimate edition where you just get all the characters. I grinded out every character, but when I saw a cool skin that I liked, I didn't feel guilty buying it because I looked at the hours I'd clocked into that game, and it was almost double, if not 10 times, the amount of hours that I've put into other single player games that I spent like $80 on. And so I felt okay with spending that money. And like people like us that are like, willing to justify, you know, like we take that time and we justify it and then we still spend the money anyways. People that were going to spend the money for these packs in an already $80 game, they're still going to be there. And they're probably going to spend more money because they have $80, extra. They, quote extra that you can spend in the game now. So I don't think they're ever going to be losing money for making this decision, for making a decision to go free to play. I think they actually would probably make more.
Jason,
I
what do
agree
you
with
think?
all that. I mean, obviously, I agree that it should go free to play because I think that's just such a great move for the consumer. Like that benefits us so much. I don't know if it's ever going to happen because even if like the three of us and however many other people out there, we're pretty confident that they'd still make an absolute killing if they went to free to play because the people who play like the ultimate teams, they're still going to be absolute cash cows walking around for EA.
Hmm.
But I think there's other solutions as well. Even if they're scared to go the full free to play route, you could still, at the very least, what I think all sports games should come with is at least the next 3 to 5 years, you should get the yearly update for free. Like when, because they don't really change the graphics between games. They don't really change the engines. But if you buy one game and then you were guaranteed the next 2 years worth of upgrades for free, I would buy the one after that runs out. Because right now, I'm going to make the current game I have last until it is absolutely unplayable compared to the next games. But if I could get 3 good years out of the game of it still being the most up to date thing, every 3 years I would rebuy because that's a decent deal to me.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the game being essentially the same game. I don't know, have you guys heard about the big gaffes with NBA 2K20 and Madden 20 as far as that's
Mm.
concerned?
No, I have not.
I've seen the outrage, but I don't really know the context.
So, what happened with both these games? So, NBA 2K20, when it released on PC and people installed it from Steam, they found that the desktop icon for NBA 2K20 actually said NBA 2K19. So what had actually happened was obviously the developers
Nice.
re-released NBA 2K19, but it was a patched version and
Oh
they
my
sold that
god.
as the new game. And same thing happened in Madden 20. When people booted up Madden 20, and this is probably worse, within the game there were banners in the arenas that said Madden
No.
19.
Yeah.
No. Oh
And
my
it's like,
god.
okay, the reason why I think that they should release games in like 3 to 5 year packages is you don't need to remake the game every year. The things you're changing are so minor that that should have just been an update patch. If it's the same game, why do
Yep.
we have 2 cartridges for it? Just make it be
Well,
an update.
and people would be less mad about every year being kind of the same with like, in terms of the gameplay and the graphics. If you had like one game that you owned, like if it was a free to play NHL, right? Or like,
Hmm.
how you say with like 3 years or what have you. I don't know how you would purchase that. But like if the season came around, like the next season as an update, and they changed the teams, they refreshed whatever, maybe they added a new like thing you could do, on the court or on the ice or whatever, or a new play that you could make in Madden, but the same, like the game looked the same and felt the same, people would be less angry than having to go and buy like NBA 20 and when it's the same game as NBA 19 because you're still playing the same game. It's
Hmm.
just got
Hmm.
some updates.
Yeah.
And so I think they would actually save themselves from a lot of hate if they made this decision.
Yeah. Speaking of a lot of hate,
If
did either of you happen by any chance to read the IGN reviews for FIFA 21 and FIFA 20 on the Switch?
No,
no,
I
but I
wouldn't give
did hear that they
myself
were
that
bad.
So
pain.
this was one of the most savage moments in gaming journalism I've ever seen. But the reviewer for FIFA 21 on the Switch on IGN posted this line at the top of the article that said, since EA decided to copy and paste FIFA 20 onto the Switch for FIFA 21 this year, I'm going to copy and paste my review from last year for this year's review.
Fucking dead. What the fuck?
Oh,
That's awesome.
golden.
What a legend.
So, what do you guys think is the problem that's stopping sports games from going free to play? What do you think is the big thing holding them back right now?
I think they
Greed.
just currently make too much money to take a risk. Like they're making
Exactly.
enough to satisfy their budget line, so they're not going to take a crazy risk. Because these are
Yep.
such predictable games. Like they are the mainstays. They are a pillar of the EA revenue. They don't need to miss on these. They can just like what they're doing works enough for a steady revenue stream.
Hmm.
They're probably too scared to take a risk and lose out on that.
I
Yeah.
wonder if it has something to do with rights too, because I don't like EA has like
That's something I wanted to get into. I'm glad you brought that up. So, one
right.
of the things that I feel like is stopping these games from going free to play is that there is a monopolization problem within the market because EA has exclusive licenses for both NHL and NFL.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, those are the only ones
FIFA?
that are exclusive. But EA is the only developer who can publish the NHL and Madden games. So
Mm.
there's no incentive for them to go free to play because they have absolutely zero competition in the market. They can completely dominate it. And if someone wants to play those sports games, they're going to pay EA's premium price tag. So where things have kind of gotten shaken up is with NBA and FIFA because NBA, EA still has their license for NBA Live, but they have competition with 2K Sports because 2K has been putting out NBA 2K for the last 22 years, and for the last several years, it has been a higher quality basketball sim. But in the first decade or so of 2K's existence, I think there was a legitimate debate between NBA Live and NBA 2K. On the FIFA side of things and football or soccer for us North Americans, you have PES, Pro Evolution Soccer, which is kind of the reason I wanted to do this topic today because Konami, who creates PES, recently announced that they're making it free to play going forward and changing the name to
Beautiful.
eFootball. So, like, FIFA is obviously the big recognizable name in soccer sims, but from what I've heard from people, PES is actually the better playing game.
Kind of funny that the
Interesting.
games that are like the main players in each sport aren't really the best game. It's almost like they've had no reason to improve anything. So the other games that need to like carve out a spot are actually trying harder. Funny.
Hmm. And they kind of try to justify the yearly releases by saying, well, it's an iterative process, each year we make small improvements until, 5 years down the line, enough has changed that it's recognizable as a new game. But I don't think that's true. I mean, I booted up NHL 21 the other day when I had my EA Play subscription, and I just played NHL 18 today, and I swear the two are indistinguishable gameplay wise. It's the
Oh yeah.
exact same
Oh
game.
yeah.
And look at the trailer for 22 because it's the same game again. The graphics have not gotten better. Bienshin,
They
that's
even
not
have the
changed.
same
They
player
even
as a
have the
few years
same
ago
play.
on the cover. They're not even
Which
hiding
is
it anymore.
absolutely a slap to the face. That is unabashed. I think they have to do that because NHL already doesn't make much money, so now their kind of only hope is to just keep putting Maple Leaf players on the cover, and Toronto fans will keep buying that. And I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. That is probably an accurate assessment, but it's sad that that's the place where they've gotten to, where they can only have the biggest market players in the biggest market be on the cover, or they're going to lose money.
Mhm. I think one of the other big problems in sports games is the aggressive monetization of them. You look at,
Yep.
for example, I don't know if they do this in NHL or FIFA or Madden's like Be a Pro modes, but in NBA 2K's My Career, to upgrade your player, you need virtual currency, which you can either earn by playing the games, but it takes forever to grind it, or you can just buy it. And so they're kind of forcing you into this position where if you don't pay to get it, like the amount you earn each game is based on your performance. Obviously, if your player sucks, you're not going to be able to perform to a level where you can earn a decent amount and upgrade your player. So you're forced into this box where if you really want to have fun in the 1 year you effectively have this game for, then you're going to have to shell out money to buy it. The other thing too that 2K has done in the last few years, which has really pissed people off, is not only do they have this aggressive monetization in terms of microtransactions, but they've also started incorporating ads into the games. Like before the game, they'll
Yeah.
show an ad for Amazon TV shows or new movies that are coming out. And it's just like, do you not already get enough like, sponsorships from like Gatorade and Nike for including their products in the game? You have to go this far to include things like
Yeah.
movie trailers in your game while I sit here and wait for my game to start. That's actually already loaded,
It's
and I'm being
stupid. And
forced to
like
sit
in a
through this.
free-to-play game, that would be like, oh, okay, that's fine. Maybe it's like a mobile game where you pay to remove ads or some stupid shit. But like in a game that you already paid $80 for, that's straight up unacceptable. Like, no way.
Yeah, how do you get away from ads? Where is our last bastion of not having an advertisement looking at us? Because normally you pay for things to get rid of those bad boys. If you're playing something for free, you expect to see a couple of them because like whoever made that, obviously they need to make enough money to eat and sleep. But if you're already paying for that service, there should not be any ads. That is inexcusable.
Well, I mean, like even a lot of free-to-play games don't have ads in them. I mean, like you could say Fortnite has ads if you say that the Marvel and DC and Star Wars skins that they have count as advertising for those characters. But like Apex Legends doesn't really have advertising in it, and neither does Warzone, as far as I understand.
Nope,
Like
neither of those have
other than to
advertising. I mean,
yeah, I mean
Warzone has
Warzone might
advertising
advertise for
for all the
Call of
hacks
Duty. Yeah.
from all the kids who hack on you all the time.
But
But
like,
yeah,
yeah, and so like the fact that those free to play games don't even have ads in them, and your $80 garbage ass half-assed game has fucking advertising in it, that's completely unacceptable.
no. Another big problem I have is the pay to win culture that has developed in sports games, especially with the emergence of game modes like NBA 2K's My Team and then the Ultimate Team modes in the EA Sports games. Because you come into these game modes and it's all about opening card packs and unlocking the best players for your team. And I mean, I don't know if this is again true for NHL or FIFA or what have you, but for NBA, they have actual tournaments within the game, within the My Team game mode. And so there's an
Mm,
incentive for people to go and build the best team right from the start of the season. And so you have to spend money if you want to have the best team because there's no way you're going to get more cards than someone else if everyone else is already spending money too. On
yeah.
top of that, they also drip feed players so that like at the beginning of the season, you can only get at most a player with like a 95 or 96 rating overall, and then by the end of
Yeah.
the season, everyone has a 99 rating.
That's crazy. I wonder if you could find a solution in that with like budgeting. Because if you said like a card like this is coming from a trading card game background of like Pokemon, but like, say if you had the player cost a certain amount of money to your team, and if this was a live service, you could update this. But like, so if your team has a certain budget, maybe based off of how you've been playing, how you've been doing, and the player comes around that costs like 13 million for a certain amount of years, and you essentially have to sign them, and so you can only have so many star players or expensive players on your team. You guys get what I'm getting at here? I think that could be
Yeah.
like an interesting solution there. Because
Yeah,
then
2K
then
sort of has
nobody.
something similar to that because they've got contracts on your players. So each
Right.
player has to have a contract in order to use them in a game, and the more upper end players you have to pay more to get a contract for them. But
Mm,
they've kind of negated that whole system by having contract cards that you can pull out of packs and just apply to your players. And by the time you've opened enough packs to
oh.
get all these good players, you've got enough of those contract cards that their whole system for preventing people from overusing those players goes out the window. And I
Yeah.
think that's entirely intentional on their part because they know people are just going to buy all these players.
Yeah. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's a
they would
little
be
bit
shooting
backwards.
themselves in the foot to do anything that would limit people from buying their way to victory. Because that's big cash. There's enough rich
Mm.
people with games and nothing better to do that they will buy their way to the top, and they would
Oh yeah.
probably, by adding any kind of like parity to that game, would lose out on big cash dollars.
Hmm. Well, and like you're not taking away like if you do my idea of like having a budget and having each card have a contract, you're not taking away the collection aspect because, if you want to have an expensive player on your team one year and then the next year not have them and instead have a different expensive player, like you can do that because you get the card in the pack and then you just kind of store them as like a collectible item. But like you stop the online play from being completely pay to win because you're actually having to think about how to balance your team for a certain budget.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying there. I think that could help. Um, I mean, in general, I don't really like to play anything where currently you can pay to win. I'll just stay away from because
Yeah.
I don't have the ability to pay to win. So I'm not even that invested in those. I kind of see that as, you know what? Rich kids can have their place to stomp around in the playground and spend all the money they want because I'm just going to play a different mode that requires more skill than your
Yeah.
dad's credit card.
Well, and that's one of the things that upsets me about the whole pay to win culture, especially in sports games, is that it marginalizes such a huge segment of the player base who might be interested in playing this game mode,
Hmm.
but because they can't afford to be competitive, they're not going to, and so they're
Yeah.
losing out on part of the experience. And
Yeah, trading card games have a lot of problems with this. Like this was what actually eventually led me out of Pokemon because like if you were to keep up with the current rotation and also have a competitive deck, you got to hash out the big dollars to get the best combination of cards in the game. And like it just becomes impossible to keep up and like I don't have the cash to just throw on Pokemon cards. And so likewise don't have the cash to throw on like a pay to win scenario video
mhm.
game.
And I feel like as a business decision, that actually ends up hurting these sports game developers in the long run because the
Yeah.
more people start to feel marginalized from these game modes, the less fun they're having with these games overall, and the less willing they're going to be to buy it next year. So,
Yep.
really, by having and allowing this pay to win culture to thrive, they're really just shooting themselves in the foot.
Yep. Because you're losing a whole segment of just casual gamers who aren't going to spend the money.
Yeah, and even just going back to the whole free to play model in general. Like, Jason, what was the last NHL game you bought? Was it NHL 18?
18, I believe, because that was the Connor McDavid edition. And
Okay,
I'm a
Mm.
sucker for anything with Connor McDavid on it.
yeah. So since NHL 18, you haven't spent any money on NHL games.
Oh, Lord, no.
And I mean, you're not going to because up until 21 at the very least, it's the same game, right?
Oh, exactly, yeah. I mean,
So,
I'm probably going to get the next year, but that's not because the game got better. That's because the NHL added another team.
but for every one of Jason, I'm sure there's thousands at least more people who are in the same situation who say, I'm not going to buy this game every year, but rather once every few years. Whereas I feel
Yeah.
like if the game were free to play, I'm sure you'd play it a lot more frequently. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would play a lot more. Um, it also would depend on how that looks. If there was a way to play online, no, I probably would just play more online because I wouldn't be worried about it just being dead every single year. Because if I try and go online in NHL 19, there's not going to be anyone on those servers because
No.
the people who play have moved on already. But I would
Mhm.
probably play a lot more online outside of the 1 year that is good when you first get it if it went to a free to play model.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's one thing that I just considered, and it's the fact that this is a lot of this is a game that a lot of kids play
Mhm.
because it's like it's rated like E10 and
Yeah.
like kids love sports and whatever, and so parents will just buy these games every year or every other year or what have you, and like if you make it free to play, you might actually have a hard time getting their money because a parent might not see the same appeal of putting their credit card into a game for like, a few packs of something than they see the appeal of like buying a physical game for their
Mhm.
kid that they know they're just going to have. And so maybe that's another reason why they might not go free to play. But
Yeah, although
um,
I'm not sure that would hold up because if you look at a game like Fortnite, where a huge segment of the player base is children, those children aren't
yes,
spending their parents' money on the game. So I'm
that's
not
true.
sure it is that hard to convince their parents to give them the credit card.
True. Maybe this might be from personal experience. I don't know what today's parents are doing with their kids online, but maybe because people are more aware that there's like an online spending culture and like what you can get from that, and maybe just like knowing that like if I was a kid playing a video game and I said to my mom, "Hey, can you give me $20 or can I use your credit card for $20 for an online skin that makes my character look different?" Like that would have been a hard no.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's understandable. Okay, so moving on a bit here. Let's say that EA Sports, 2K Sports, they decide to go free to play. What do you guys think that would look like? How do you think these games could go free to play but still be viable financially for these developers?
I think you see a lot. Like it would have to focus on online play and the skins, the customization. I imagine they'd move like even the Be a Pro. It's all gonna come down to like there is a base experience you can have, but you are so much further enriched by buying things to add to it. Especially with EA, they are pretty unabashed with you needing to pay money to have a good time with doing things. I think they would go pretty far out there where if you want to upgrade your Be a Pro player, you either like as you were saying for NBA, you grind for a stupid long time, or you just buy your way up. Or if you want to, play online, you need to buy your players. Other than like, I'm sure they'll keep the basic, you pick a team and play against someone else with that team. But they put a lot more effort into every other game mode to make forward progression difficult. I mean, with the
Hmm.
main
Mm,
like player versus player, I think like you can't really. You're just playing the Whalers. You can't pay money to upgrade
Yeah.
that experience. But I think they would have more modes where there is some kind of linear progression you need to do or your character needs to do, and then they would just give you easily monetizable routes of doing that. And they'd probably spend a lot more time on the customization of things with a lot more unlockables. Even in like be a GM mode, you could have some things that you pay money to get extra things to unlock jerseys. You can probably like buy some things for your arena and your rink to look better. You can buy like a cooler Zamboni. I don't know, but they probably add like a lot more cosmetics and
New
a lot more
Jumbotron.
pathways. New
yeah.
jumbotron. That'd be a massive money maker. But yeah, like
Hmm.
like just general cosmetics around the game, and then I bet you they'd make a easy path to forward progression through just buying experience points or buying player packs or whatever.
Yeah, I can only half agree with you there, Jason, because I think a lot of free-to-play games now have to avoid pay-to-win scenarios.
Well,
Otherwise,
why don't you
people
half go
people
fuck
will.
yourself?
Well, because like think about Fortnite, Apex, Warzone. Like you can buy cosmetics and stuff, and you can buy like a Cronus and you can be good, but like you can't pay to like reach level 500. You have to get to that point on your own by playing. And I think that that is the only way that these sports games can go without like aggravating or antagonizing the population of their player base even more.
Well, and you
Because
look
like
at those
if you
games like Apex and Warzone, the people who are paying to win are people who are buying hacks with their money. And when
yeah.
people do that, it just drives other players away from the game. Warzone has lost a ton of players, especially big name streamers, in the
Yeah.
last month or so because their hacking problem has gotten so out of control.
hmm Yeah, and so I think that they need to make it like purely cosmetic based. And like what you said, Jason, like the two modes that will probably be online, like are be a pro and the GM mode. And for be a pro, I think you could have cosmetics that are just like gloves, helmet, stick, taping, all of that sort of business. But like I don't think you need to have any way to pay to increase your player's skill. I think you're just gonna have to do that by playing the game of grinding. If they want to keep the packs, though, I think they can still do that in the way that I suggested, where you can pay for a pack, you can get a player or access to a player, but you still have to budget for them according to what the season tells you. Like so, like the live service tells you that they are worth at that point in time. And they can judge that based off of an economy too, because if you're doing something like free agency, you can see what people are willing to pay for certain players. Depending on where they are in real life and how the game is constantly reflecting that. Um, and so like not only could you open packs and then get access to these players, but then you can go into free agency and like you can bid on players and then maybe there's other players bidding against you or what have you. I don't know. I think that would be fun. But I do not see them if they were to do this. I would highly advise against any pay to win scenarios because so many games have gotten flack for that.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the unfortunate things I think is that the pay to win culture is so entrenched within sports games at this point that I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. And I mean, if you look at it even broader, yearly releases for full price are also entrenched into the sports game culture. We have this expectation now that every year. It's like there's three certainties in life: death, taxes, and a new fucking sports game from your favorite league every year. And
Yeah.
it's going to come out regardless. And so we've all got this expectation, and everyone knows it's going to come out and pay full price. But it's, like we were saying last episode, these are the cash grabs of video games, and people are just going to pay for them. If they were going to go free to play, what I kind of envisioned, and I hadn't looked this up before, but I had this idea, and then I realized this is actually what I think, from my understanding, Konami is actually doing with eFootball going forward. Is there? I would have the base game, like quick play matches where it's one team versus another, as the free to play base experience with free updates for roster changes as each season comes and goes. But then other game modes that you want to add on to enhance your experience are separate expansion content packs that you have to pay for. So, like the Be a Pro, the GM modes, you pay a small fee and then you have access to those. And that way, players can pick and choose the parts of these sports games that they want to play. Because I know for a lot of my more casual gamer friends who only play these sports games and only play them once in a while, they aren't about the grind for the my team or the my career stuff. They don't want to get into the whole trading card thing or the linear progression at a snail's pace. They just want to sit down and play a quick game with their friends. And so by having the opportunity to do that without paying, you at least bring that player into the community where now they're exposed to the opportunity to pay to expand their game if they're interested in trying out one of these other game modes, which I think kind of negates the pay to win problem in some ways, and also it doesn't rely solely on cosmetics for a source of revenue. Because with a lot of sports games, I mean, I feel like the way the games are designed, the cosmetics are something you don't really notice all that often, especially if, like, I know a lot of people don't want sports games to go all wild and wacky and have like neon glowing hockey sticks or something, or glow in the dark basketball shoes. They want it to stay true to the sport in some sense. And so there's a limited range of what you can do with cosmetics. So I think maybe having a sort of gatekeeping fee on additional game modes might be the ideal solution. And another thing I thought about that you actually brought up, Kyle, was ads, and including ads in the free to play version, and then having a premium version where you can pay to make ads go away, just like a mobile game. I don't think that would be the worst solution in the world.
I actually have to disagree with you on the pay to access different modes, because I think when you gatekeep that, like in from a business sense, like if you have to have people pay to access a mode in which you want to encourage them to continue to pay more money, like I think you're going to lose some people. And if you have people that are there and able to access that for free already, they're going to maybe, they have the option to dip their toe in if they want to mess around with this, and then maybe get exposed to something that they like, and then maybe make a purchase, and then maybe you've got somebody who wouldn't already or wouldn't necessarily have made that choice because there's a paywall,
True,
you
but
know?
as it stands today, you have to pay the full price tag of the game to get access to that anyway.
Yes,
So
I
if
know,
you
but
cut that
like that's
fee
for the
down by
full
a
game.
significant amount to pay for that portion of the game, but you're getting at least the base experience for free, I think that at least allows them to maintain some of their revenue, at least as a short-term solution, while also providing the experience of the game for free.
But I don't think you're going to get any money out of people that way. Because like that's who they want to pay $80 a year anyways. The people that aren't going to be, they aren't their cash cows. They are just going to buy the base experience and only play the base experience every year for $80. And so as soon as you make that free to play and have the base experience be free, then you don't have them have access to your other revenue streams. You are not getting any money from those people ever again, because they're just going to play the one game with it they have access for free that you're going to update every season, and that's it. And like there's some people that play other free to play games and don't pay any money in, like for Fortnite or Apex. But like when you limit their option to do that, like you're suddenly cutting off a potential revenue stream just by that that gatekeeping.
Okay, so how about this then? Having access to the mode, but having seasonal updates. So, for example, NBA 2K's My Career mode, every year they release a new game, they have a new sort of story that goes with your player. So, maybe you have access to the game mode itself, but not the stories, and then you pay a fee, like kind of like a battle pass for a new story each season. Do you think that would
Yeah,
work better?
I think that would be fine. I think any sort of like season pass sort of thing would be fine too. But yeah, I think that'll be better than limiting access to game modes.
I think you could. I think there's a lot of ways to do that, and it's really hard to say what wouldn't work without having like, market research sitting in front of us. Because if people
Yeah.
are willing to pay $80 per year for those game modes, I'm sure there is a market of people who would pay a little bit more on top of the free base game to do it. But it's hard to like really measure what would be financially successful without taking like an actual like deep dive into it, because a lot of how we see things as being financially successful is going to be tainted their own biases. And when Nick suggested that, I thought it was a good idea, because if I had that setup where I have a free to play game, but like I want to do my career, I'd pay for that. That's not a big deal to me. That's, if anything, that seems like a fair deal, because now I'm not paying money for modes I don't want, so I would be more likely to do that. So it could be
But
hard to say.
if it's all free, then you're not paying anything anyways. Like you're just having access to these modes. So like it's not a matter of like I'm not getting something that I didn't want to pay for. It's like you're getting everything and you can play whatever you want, and the person that's just going to play the one game mode, might get bored of that one day and take a little stroll down be a pro lane and decide that they want the cosmetics or they want to change their appearance or they want to work their way up and do that because the main gameplay isn't doing enough for them, but they want to keep playing that game.
I mean, I'm not worried about that market segment of people who might be willing to buy cosmetics but only care about one main game mode. I don't think that's a huge swath of people. Normally, if you're gonna like really milk someone on the cosmetics and extra stuff, they're already a hardcore fan and probably playing multiple modes, have favorites, do a mix of everything. I think what this does is the free-to-play base game gets a bunch of people in there, and then unlocking more people just marginally gets you more people to buy those game modes. The market segment of people who might be willing to put more money into some cosmetics if all game modes are free. If I have that basis versus making some things free, but like small add-on fees to get more games, I'm taking the small add-on fees to get more games. I think that's going to get you a better return because the people who buy cosmetics, they're already going to be more hardcore into the game. So
Yeah, but they don't. They're only going to pay for that mode once though, and then like if they're not going to pay for cosmetics, or if they are going to pay for cosmetics, then they're going to pay for cosmetics. But like there's like we were talking about earlier, there's people that are casually willing to pay for something, but aren't like the big whales. And so as soon as you limit that access, like their budget of however much they were willing to spend on this is immediately cut by the cost of the game mode of accessing the game mode. Say
Right.
like you have thirty
But
dollars to pay, or that are you're willing to pay for a video game, and 15 of those dollars is for to access one game mode. You're not only willing to spend another $15.
but
Wherein I
that's
mean
no
like you're
change
still
for you.
spending I know you're still spending the same amount of money, but I just think that like as soon as you limit the access, like you stop the wandering souls. I think people are
but
gonna
Kyle,
casually pay for
if you look
skins.
at paid expansions for games, people are
Yeah.
limited in their access to the full content of the game, even if it's already downloaded to their console via an update. And if they want to access that additional content, they have to pay for the DLC. So that's
Yeah.
kind of my view on having the pay to access the game modes. It's no different from an expansion. It's just included with the game at launch.
I think that would sour people though, because
I don't
especially if
think it
they
would
were
sour
already
them
getting.
any more than their current
I think they
practices.
would. I think
I don't
people
think
would
it
look
would
at it and
sour
say, if
people
you're
though if
going
they're
free to
getting the
play,
game
then
for
go free
free.
to play. I
But if
know,
they're
but if
getting
you're
the
going
game for
free to play,
free
then
as
go free to
opposed to
play.
the $90 that we're now paying for these games when they come out new, and then you pay only a small portion of that to get what you want out of the game, I think people would be happy with that. I think as long as there's a cap
Uh,
where accessing the full game costs no more than what you would otherwise have paid for the game, then I don't think it's a problem.
I can't really agree with you, but we are going to be talking in circles if we keep on this topic for
Fair
much
enough.
longer.
But I think we are all at least in agreement that sports games could benefit long term from going free to play.
It's so
Oh yeah.
pro-consumer too, like which is they don't want to go pro-consumer, but it
No.
would be pro-consumer.
Oh no,
They're
they don't care.
scared to go pro consumer. We
No,
dare them to go pro
if they
consumer.
cared about the consumer, they wouldn't so aggressively shove microtransactions down our throats, especially knowing how vulnerable some people are to that kind of thing. But they're
Yeah.
going to continue doing it as long as there is so little competition in the sports game market, with only like a small handful of developers competing for those market shares. It Nothing's going to change. But we can dream.
Yeah,
We can.
we can.
Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys for joining me again here today on the L2 Games Podcast. And thank you everyone who tuned in for listening. We'll catch you in the next one.
See you next time.
Bye.